Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the NYALPA podcast. We're so glad that you're here. Each episode, we bring you voices from the field who are shaping multilingual learner education and helping us strengthen systems, leadership, and opportunities for students across the country. Today, I'm so honored to welcome Dr. Ivanna Manthrower-Anderson, a past president of NYALPA and current co-chair of the Advancing Multilingual Learner Policy and Practice Committee, also known as AMP. Ivanna has served as a multilingual Title III consultant with the North Carolina Department of Instruction, and she brings over 40 years of experience serving multilingual learners across the United States and internationally. So, Ivanna, thanks so much for being here today. It's so great to reconnect.
Jamie, it is so exciting to get to see you. I'm just the smile on both of our faces. It's like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Just to get us started, I just want to ask you if you had a couple of minutes to just share with somebody why they should join NYALPA, what would you say to them?
You know, I think back to when I was president and we first started saying we were the voice for English learners, now multilingual learners. And I remember sometimes I was like, oh, can we really say that? Like, that seemed so bold. But that would be the first thing I would have to share, that NYALPA is the voice for multilingual learners, and people from SEAs and LEAs and anyone who's a supporter of multilingual learners. We just really have the opportunity to come together with the powerful purpose of making sure that every voice counts. And so just like our tagline says, we're small enough that every voice can be heard, and yet large enough that as an organization we're heard. And I did a research paper looking at all of the ways that we're connected to other people and how we're connected to people at the state level and at the federal level. And our voices can really be heard in a two-way dialogue with the change makers in our country. And that is so powerful, especially with where we are right now. So I would say to someone, your voice needs to be heard. Your leadership can be used. Come join us in NYALPA.
Awesome. I think that's such an important point, because I think so often we start to feel like, what's one more voice? Kind of like, what's one more vote, right? But if everybody takes that stance of what's one more voice, how much of a difference does my voice individually make? But collectively, when all of our voices come together, one more voice adds a tremendous amount of synergy to
Absolutely.
it. So I do think every one of us has to take on that responsibility, because at the end of the day, if we all say, well, I'm just one, right? But the power of one is so powerful.
Or if we wait for someone else to do it,
Yeah.
then it doesn't get done.
Exactly. So can you share, I know I did a little introduction about your work and your sort of all the amazing things that you've been doing, and I just was wondering if you could just kind of elaborate a little more about your work within NYALPA, but also just beyond, and how that connects to supporting our multilingual learners across the country.
Sure. Well, I laugh when I hear, 40 years. It's like, but it's true. I'm not really that old. I'll just announce that I just turned 60. But I started with English as a second language as a 19-year-old in college. I stumbled onto the wrong floor of a church teaching ESL back in the 80s. And so I have had my finger in English as a second language since the 80s. Back when our teachers, well, some of them still do, but back when our teachers were in closets,
Yes.
teaching because there was nowhere else and no one knew what to do with those kids. And I had the privilege of teaching both in the K-12 arena, but before that at the university with the Language Institute, as well as with the community college, and teaching courses for our educators. And so I've had the opportunity to sort of stick my finger in all that in the United States, but also overseas in Korea and China. And so it's been a fascinating opportunity to see what's happening in the world. But when I started with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction back in 2009, it was probably 10 or 11 when I first heard about NYALPA. And it wasn't NYALPA then, right? It was the NCSTIIID.
I remember. I remember that.
And being part of that, knowing there was an organization of like-minded people who were working at the national level. And at that point, it was state leaders. We didn't have our LEAs involved.
Right.
It was our state leaders. And that was powerful, but not as powerful as it could be with the state leaders. And so, I come to that because it wasn't because of me, but it was during my presidency that we rebranded and became NYALPA and became an organization that really valued our LEA voices at a higher level, where LEAs could then be full members, and now LEAs get to be leaders as well, which I think just gives our voice so much more power. And so that's just been part of that journey where I feel like I've had the opportunity to see so many changes for the good,
Mm-hmm.
and now so many changes that we're not sure what's going to happen to our world.
Yeah. So a couple things that you said that just really made me start sort of reminiscing a bit. One is just this idea of, back when, teachers used to teach in the closet. I actually started my teaching career in a K-12 ESL assignment, and so I moved building to building, and my classroom was literally in the trunk of my car in a big Rubbermaid tub, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I would go into buildings, and typically they didn't have a classroom for me because I was an itinerant teacher moving around, and I used to have mostly like these storage closets. So you go in this small space where I kind of joke and say it's where all the old AV equipment went to die, but that's really true. We're like in the middle of all these like projectors and things that are all covered up and dusty, right? But, and I used to think when I was young and teaching early on, I thought, well, how am I supposed to teach in this environment? How are we supposed to learn in this environment? But you know what I learned? It wasn't about the space. It was just really about, we were crammed into that space. We were almost sitting on top of each other with this tiny little table. But my kids learned and grew, and we had so
Mm-hmm.
much fun. There was so much laughter, so many things that we were able to just experience. And I realized, you know what? I always longed for like a room where I could put everything on the walls and do all the decoration. But then I realized at the end of the day, it was about those relationships. And sometimes, the closer you are physically, the closer you are emotionally. And I go around, and when I'm speaking now, I talk to folks, and you'd be amazed at how many people raise their hand when I ask, does anyone still teach like this?
Mm-hmm.
This is still what's
Mm-hmm.
happening across the country for many of our teachers who are EL
Mm-hmm.
specialists. They are still traveling building to building. They are still without their own classroom. But I just always like to encourage them, because at the end of the day, I at first thought, well, I'm really disadvantaged here.
Mm.
But you know what? I didn't find that that was truly the experience of the students. And that, again, like we just really did see so much growth. And so I guess I just want to encourage all teachers out there that maybe still have to teach around the old AV equipment that's dying. Like, just know that the work you're doing with students, whether it's in a massive classroom with walls decorated or in a closet that you end up in as you travel building to building, your the difference you're making cannot be
Yes.
underestimated with whatever space you're teaching in. So, and then also you said something about when, during your presidency, and it made me think it's been a while, but we served on NIALPA together.
Yes.
We were in the NCST 3D association together when I was at the Iowa Department of Education and you were at North Carolina. So I think that's where we very
Mm-hmm.
first met. And I just was like, has it been that long ago? But I think it has been almost
It
20 years
has.
ago. So, so yeah, so you also mentioned just the teaching that you've done overseas. How has that overseas experience shaped your perspective on multilingual learner education when you taught in Korea and China? How did you bring back those experiences to your work here in the United States?
One of the things that really changed my philosophy completely, um, as understanding linguistics and understanding how people learn a language. So when I went to Korea, I had left Wake Tech, Wake Technical College, teaching ESL there, and I was an English only proponent because that's what I'd been told.
Mm,
English only, you need to learn English. Went to Korea, and as I began to learn Korean, I realized that if I took 1 minute to explain what I wanted them to do in Korean, we could then have 45 minutes to do it in English
mm,
rather than spending 20
yeah,
minutes trying to explain in English something that I could have told them in Korean.
yeah,
And so that's hard to transfer back in some ways, especially when you have, maybe 6 different languages, 20 different languages in your classroom. But
right.
it really opened up my mind to the understanding of how we learn a language
Hmm.
and how important it is to use our language to the best way to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And so now, now we have a name for it, translanguaging, or using different things in bilingual education, but that was very unheard of back in the late 80s, early 90s. So
Hmm.
that was one thing. But more important even than that, I think, was the whole idea of relationship and being immersed in a culture and understanding how much culture impacts who we are as a person. You can't just teach a language,
Yeah.
right? You've got to connect with that person and with their culture. You've got to, we always hear about, oh, the Chinese children that got in trouble because they wouldn't look the teacher in the eye.
Hmm.
And nobody's going to learn if they're being chastised and told to do something against everything they believe in.
Hmm.
And so, learning and being immersed in a culture, both in China and Korea, which are very different in many ways, but being immersed in cultures where not only could I not speak the language, I couldn't read the language, and understanding from in the moment perspective what it is that many of our students deal with. And also understanding, as a female, my role in these foreign countries was very different than it might have been in the United States. And so being able to take all those pieces back and become more aware of paying attention to what aspects of culture are working into my classrooms and learning to ask questions. I ask a lot of questions when I lived overseas. Why do you do that? What's this purpose? What does this mean? And just taking that curiosity with me back into the classroom with my students and with their families.
I love that. And just thinking about how much that experiential learning matters. And I wonder how we can help our teachers and administrators here in the United States have more of those experiential opportunities if they can't go overseas, because I think it makes such a big difference once you can sort of step inside someone else's experience. It changes forever how you see it for your students and their families, right? So I just wonder how we could give more of our educators and administrators an experience like that if they can't actually travel overseas and spend time like you did.
Right. There's been different ways that we've done that, like with shock lessons, using
Yeah.
different languages, using different
Simulations.
cultures. Bafa, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I wish
Oh,
that would
yes.
come back. But in my dissertation research, I used the Tree of Life as a non-traditional professional learning opportunity for educators of multilingual learners to reflect on themselves. Like, what are your roots? What makes you who you are? What causes you to see things the way you see things? And then looking at your strengths and looking at your goals. And it was amazing for me because I didn't intend to start out with dual language teachers. I intended to start out with basically monolingual educators in regular classrooms. And so when I had to shift and ended up with bilingual teachers, it was like, oh no, they already have this great understanding and they already have this sense of agency of working with these students. What are they going to get from my work? And both of them were amazed because looking at their roots and looking at their strengths and looking at why they do what they do, not necessarily so much that they did something different, but understanding why they did it, changed the way that they worked with their students. And it opened their eyes further to the culture, to the language, to the needs.
Awesome.
And it also allowed them to reach out to other educators in different ways about those students. And so for me, just because that is my research, I think that is one way to really look at an alternative type of professional learning, because you can learn all the strategies, but if you don't care about the students, just real quick, I'll tell you, when I was the SIOP coach in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, I went in to coach this one teacher, this young man, and he was so proud to show me his SIOP book from our training. He had it holding up his projector. And he was proud of that. It doesn't matter how much training you give that man, unless he has an understanding of himself and his students, nothing's going to change in those dynamics in his classroom. And so I just think it's so important that in addition to these strategies that are so important, that we have some sort of self-reflection and we understand more about who we are and understand more about who our students are. And I found the Tree of Life to be a really powerful way to do that.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. And I'm also thinking back to kind of like the home visit opportunities that we built into all of our Title III work when I was teaching, and then also even at the state level when we were kind of looking at programs and making suggestions for ways to better involve families and strengthen that homeschool connection. I always found that when teachers did that home visit, it did forever change their perspective. They had a lot of assumptions, a lot of things that maybe they thought they knew that they didn't know.
Right.
And so those home visits were also another powerful way. So I love this idea of the Tree of Life and just those experiences where you get outside of your comfort from the teaching and learning experience and really get into the experience of the students' lives, the families' lives, their experiences outside of school, because it will forever make you a better teacher.
And when you look at yourself on purpose, so often we don't do that. So often as educators, one, we don't have the time to stop and self-reflect.
Right.
There's so much burnout. There's so much going on in education right now that the Tree of Life, at least based on the research, the small amount of research that I did, it showed that it reinvigorated the purpose and it helped them look at their why. And so both of them came back feeling reinvigorated in their classrooms, being reinvigorated in what they were doing, and not just what they were doing now, but it also helped them look at the future and where they wanted to go with their careers.
Well, I love that. I think everyone, it's May, it's the end of the school year. I think everyone needs a little Tree of Life and reinvigoration right now, right? So talk to me a little bit about just, your co-chair role on the AMP committee for NIALPA. What are some of the most important conversations or priorities that you see emerging in the field right now based on your work on that committee?
Wow, that could take another hour in and of itself. But first of all, I want to give a shout out to my amazing co-chair, Dr. Julie Sugarman. I think one of the great things about being co-chairs of a committee like that is Julie and I, we have very different life experiences, we have different work experiences, and we also see things in different ways. And so there's this great opportunity for us to come together, even in planning the agendas, to look at things from different ways and to say, well, this is important to me for this reason, but it's important to her for a different reason. And then to bring it to the committee. And the committee has such a variety of backgrounds of the people who join us. It's not just SEAs and LEAs. It's people that are working maybe with our textbooks, or people who are working. We have Bill Rivers, Dr. Bill William Rivers, who is working with us, who's on the Hill all the time. Mm-hmm. So we have the opportunity. Again, I go back to voice. I'm always back to voice. We have the opportunity to hear each other's voices, but then we have the opportunity to have our voice make a difference. And so I feel like when you are in that committee, you're on the cutting edge of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And what's happening right now, I'll just be honest, it's heart-wrenching. Yeah. To see the Office of English Language Acquisition non-existent anymore, as of May 14th, and to see what's happening to the Department of Education, in my opinion, and I'm only speaking for myself, but I think there are others that would agree that as a SEA person, the control was in the state. We had control over the education, specifically of our multilingual learners, with support from the federal government. And so one of the things we talk about in the committee is, what do we do now that that support's not there? But also, how do we plan? How do we hope for the future when that support may be rebuilt? Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of excited that when that opportunity does happen, we'll be able to rebuild from the ground up. And we'll be able to take the things that were good and make them better. And we'll be able to do new and different things, maybe cutting edge things that weren't there before. So part of what we talk about in that committee is what's happening right now, but also what do we hope will happen in the future? What is our hope? And what can we continue to do to support our multilingual learners right now in the situation that we're in? Yeah. So I think it's just a powerful committee to be in. It's just a wonderful opportunity, again, back to voice, to share our voices internally and then to figure out how to take those voices externally and make a difference.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, to your point, that committee is so critical right now as states and districts are trying to figure out how to navigate the changing landscape in education and what's going on at the federal level. So I think keep up the great work and continue to dig into all those policies and think about how we can help, provide guidance and support to our districts and schools. So you kind of mentioned this idea of hope, and I'm just curious, what gives you the most hope about the future of our multilingual learner education system and the next generation of leaders who are entering this work? What makes you hopeful?
Historical resilience,
okay,
I think, is a big part of the hope. There is such historical resilience among this population of students and families, but also amongst our educators. Just like we talked about earlier, we started out in closets, and some of us actually ended up with classrooms. I still had a cart, I didn't even have a closet. I had a cart for one of mine. But the resilience of the people, and the resilience and the love and the relationship and the belief that we're doing the right thing, that we're talking about people. We're not talking about numbers. We're not talking about labels, right? We're talking about human beings and ways to support them. And I just think it's so powerful that historical resilience, it really isn't historical because it keeps going, right? It never stopped. And I believe for me that the hope comes from that resilience and how the struggles make us stronger. They really do make us stronger. I hear what we talk about in the AMP committee. I hear what we talk about in NAILPA. We're part of the English Learner Roundtable. To hear what the English Learner Roundtable talks about with leaders from other organizations and how we're all looking for the opportunity to continue and the opportunity to make it better, whatever it becomes. I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I was just going to say, I think that's what gives me the most hope, is just how many organizations are coming together, and how NIALPA has taken a leadership role in bringing people together and continuing to build our network, because there's definitely strength in numbers, right? So the more we continue to come together and break down silos across organizations, across, LEAs and SEAs, like there's never a better time for us to really all be pulling in the same direction. And I think NIALPA plays a major role in allowing that to happen across the country. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for your leadership, Ivanna, and your perspective. Your work has had a tremendous impact on the field and so many educators and multilingual learners across the country. So just want to say thank you for being here today. And then I want to thank our NIALPA podcast listeners and viewers. I want to remind everyone to stay connected with NIALPA and continue learning alongside the incredible community of educators and leaders we have here at NIALPA. And then until next time, keep leaning on the organization and the voice of multilingual learners across the country.
Thank you, Jovi.